Hi, my name is Ethan Crawford. Today I'm going to be informing you on the origins of EMS, the key developments that have taken place over its lifetime, and the impact that it has on the community it sets out to serve. So, what is EMS? That stands for Emergency Medical Services, primarily in the pre hospital care setting. That care can range from basic medical advice to medical interventions to the administration of medication or the assistance in administering medication, and finally transport to a higher level of care, that primarily being a hospital or a ALS intercept. So, what is ALS? What is BLS? That is your basic life support and your advanced life support. Basic life support is comprised of EMRs, which consist of police, ski patrol, park rangers, firefighters. They can assist with basic life support until a higher level of care arrives. It is the same thing with an EMT. They have a scope of practice that they follow, which is set guidelines given to them by their medical director and by their state, as well as the National Registry of EMTs. That's my source for that. So they have protocols that they follow that dictate what they can and cannot do. For example, a paramedic can start IVs while an EMT can't. A paramedic can intubate a patient while an EMT can't. So there are different levels for basic and advanced. That being basic and advanced. So, what is the history regarding EMS? It starts out from battlefield medicine, very basic and rudimentary stuff, all dating back to ancient times, ancient Rome, up to the Napoleonic Wars and the American Civil War. We're in America, so I'm going to be focusing mainly on the Civil War. Um, During the Battle of the Potomac, a major Dr. Jonathan Letterman, kind of realized that a lot of the casualties they were taking could have been prevented if those wounded soldiers had received care during the battle instead of after the battle was as customary. So he established the U.S. Ambulance Corps with himself as the medical director, giving medical advice to the medical personnel below him, instructing them what to do on how to save the lives of wounded soldiers during the battle instead of waiting until after the battle. So the U.S. Ambulance Corps was very effective, drastically improved the chances of a soldier surviving after being wounded in battle. And with its popularity, it became widespread throughout the Union Army. And even following the war in 1865, they implemented the first ambulance service in Cincinnati, Ohio. That ambulance service was very basic, very bare bones, like I mentioned. They didn't put the emphasis on pre-hospital care that we do today. It was more of a load and go kind of thing. They wouldn't really sit around. They wouldn't assess the person that much. They wouldn't take vitals. They wouldn't, give them medications. They wouldn't try and fix the issue at hand. They were only concerned with getting them into the rig and driving off, basically. It's a lot different from now. I got that source for the Civil War from the National Emergency Medical Services Memorial Foundation, and the protocols that we get, there's information on that from the National Registry of EMTs. Now I'll be talking about the main differences between modern EMS and EMS in the 20th. I guess that's modern EMS, but EMS is so new that I guess the 20th century would technically be considered almost ancient. The practices are almost ancient compared to nowadays. The formation of paramedics wasn't even a thing yet until around the early 70s. So advanced life support maneuvers wouldn't be administered in the field at that time. It would all be basically EMTs. And EMTs really hadn't been established until the early 60s. And EMS wasn't really widespread around the country until the release of the Accidental Death and Dying Disability papers of 1966 under the Lyndon B. Johnson administration. That was basically a heads up to the country that, hey, we're having a lot of people dying of things that could have been prevented, things that would have been prevented if there was more of an emphasis on pre-hospital care, dealing with the concerns that people have then and there instead of just stuffing them in the hospital, stuffing them in the ambulance and driving them to the hospital. Nowadays, if someone is having an allergic reaction, someone's going to give them an EpiPen or drop epinephrine through a syringe. They're going to try and do everything they can to address that issue as soon as possible. Whereas back in the 20th century, the early 1900s, like they see a guy having anaphylactic shock, they're just going to put him in the truck and go. Oftentimes, it would either be police services or funeral services that would transport people, usually in the back of hearses. So we've made a lot of changes from way back then. Biggest change, like I said, being pre-hospital care. In conclusion, EMS is a wild ride of trials and tribulations with the end goal of aiding the populace that they serve. It's changed a lot from the battlefield medicine of ancient times, the horse and buggy carrying wounded soldiers. Nowadays, everyone's familiar with the lights and sirens, the ambulance, and the providers that come and speak to you, get to know you, establish all your concerns and address them, as you go. So, because back in the day, it wasn't like that at all. They just show up and you just leave, like I said. So, I hope this was very informative for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe this sparks an interest in EMS that you might have had. And thank you for listening. One last thing, I got the source for the um, changes regarding the modern century and the past century from the Journal of Emergency Medical Services. Thank you.